We'll talk today about the quality attributes analysis. I tried to represent it with the pyramids, the thing that stood the test of time. And today we'll talk about that as well with how well do you address the things that have long-term perspectives and are important for your projects. I'll start from a brief introduction about myself. So this is me. I spent about 14 years in IT, mostly in product management and business analysis. And what I do is I build the business analysis competency for companies. Previously did it for SoftServe, currently doing this for Cyclum. So I'm responsible for the team of business analysts, for their competence and for their success in projects, as well as for the company approaches for clients, how the business analysis is being done. I'm also a certified business analysis professional about 5 years ago, and I also know a little bit about enterprise architecture and product management, and in agile, but today we'll focus on a thing that has no certifications but is really important for all of us. And I'll start from a very few simple statements. If these are familiar for you, you've heard them from your team, from your developers or architects, please raise your hand. I just want to see many hands, nice. So often when we are doing the project already, somewhere in the middle of the project, for some unlucky BAs, that's the end of the project, we see that we have forgot something. We forgot about some qualities of the system, which is not the functionality that we were building. And it actually destroys the entire effort. So the year or two or half a year that we've spent on building something, in the end, it may be just kind of disqualified. And there are some things that we need to pay attention to upfront, but at the core of all of that is a very simple concept of assumptions. We all make assumptions. You make assumptions every day. Your clients make assumptions, and there's a lot of assumptions on projects about many, many different things. And some of them are explicit, so we write them, we state them, and we work with them. But I don't know, huge percent of, maybe 90% of the assumptions, we don't have enough time to validate all of them. They are implicit. And we struggle with them later on late stages of the project. And the things that are important for a business analyst or for the team that wants to build a successful product, it's not just the application, it's many, many other things in the business that I hope you all understand. Things like business rules, business processes, assumptions about the market, some events on the market, what's important for the market or for your group of stakeholders as well. If you're building a product for internal use. What are the locations that the business is operating in? Just a small example for one of the products, people made an assumption, people working on the project made the assumption that if the client is from the US, then the entire product will be distributed only in the US. But on the late stages of the project, they found out that that's the global product. It will be used simultaneously across the globe, and they had to change the entire architecture and entire approach on how users log into the system. They found out that they are not able to turn the system off. There's no downtime for the system at all, and they had to scrap and rework the entire project. So there are many things that we need to pay attention to, and we call them in some specific way. Classic distribution, I'll use the Babcock classification, has this box called solution requirements, which are divided into functional and non-functional. So we start with the business requirements. Nice talk today on a parallel session. We need to be focused on that. We elicit them from stakeholders, and then we come to this lower level of solution requirements. At least that's the ideology of the most well-known standard. And then we divide them into functional and non-functional. But today I want to challenge this division, which is, I think, misguides you, misguides analysts, misguides people that you're working with. Is it really the non-functional, or should it be called differently? The definition in the Babcock is really simple. We'll not spend too much time here. It's that the non-functional requirements, they augment the functional part, give it power, and they identify some constraints in the solution. There's other definition that I like from Carl Wiggers, one of the best experts, I think, in our field. And he says that this is something that the system must exhibit, but something that we cannot observe. So this is what we will be talking about today. I have highlighted a simple list of few of the quality attributes or non-functional requirements, and I think most of these here would be familiar for you, but there's many more. We can always go deeper, so I'll just add a little bit more and a little bit more, and still the list is not full. So it's purposely overwhelming for you, so you will not be able to read all it. But there is many, many different things that are not functionality, but we need to take into account. I have reduced this list maybe by 2 additional columns, but we can explore more and more. You can invent even your own if you'll see that your customers need it. So how we address all of this? It's how long the solution takes to develop. Is it secure? How easy it is to maintain the solution? Is it easy to modify the solution in the middle of when we are building, in the end of we are building? If we would like to transfer the data from this solution to some other source, is it easy to do? Would it be, how mobile the solution will be? Can we replicate it in terms of infrastructure? Can we reuse its parts? How modular the solution is being built? So many, many, many different things. Who addresses, on your projects, who addresses at least 5? Raise your hand. 1 hand. So, how do we do that? First of all, I'll just introduce the simplest possible approach. You go back to this list and select some specific amount, let's say limited to 10, that you will write down and use this card on your project when you are working on anything functional. Just keep in mind that you have this list. You will have to spend some time to select, to investigate, and you use this list in all of the discussions, or if you have time and you can articulate the importance of that to your team and client, then you also define it explicitly. So these are just a suggestion, the list that I'm using with my business analyst currently at Cyclum. You may build your own. So we defined 2 categories, like 2 groups: primary, really simple one, and the secondary if we have more time and we need to spend more attention to it. So these are, I think, you all pretty common sense. The availability, compatibility, performance, scalability, security, testability is pretty important for us, usability or accessibility depending on how specific your project is, and then some of the attributes to the right. But we need some approach on how to define them specifically, and we have some problems with that. Number 1 problem, there is no common ontology. I'm giving you one list today. You can find 10, 20 books. Every other book will give you a different list. And they are all context specific. So if I will say availability, I will imagine something. If I will say this in a year from now, it will be a different definition. If I will have a discussion with architect, it will be something different. If any one of you will try to explain the availability right now, I bet we'll have 20 different definitions in 10 minutes. So that's another issue. And the list is incomplete. There is no single source to find them all. And this makes it pretty challenging to address. So I wanted to give you a few approaches today how we can do that. But the most important thing is, can we do this before we start the implementation? Typically, we have to address this before we start the implementation, because you probably all know that the later stage that the project is in, the more money and time will have to be spent in case if you have some unvalidated assumptions that came out to be true that that's not true anymore. Market is changing today, maybe every 3 months, as well as your stakeholders, they have to react, and there should be some way to define this upfront, and I will give you one technique to do that. So, and you want to avoid this. That's the, I try to represent the functionality. It will drive. You have everything inside it, but the speed will be unsatisfactory, and you will have some issue with controls. So this is what we want to avoid. But one question for you. Who do you think should be responsible for definition of the quality attributes or non-functional requirements? Please raise your hand if you think that should be the architects, system architects, solution architects. 4 hands. Business analyst? Anyone? Most of you? Dev team? Testing team? quality assurance, quality control, product manager maybe. Product manager. Okay, so we have winners with product manager and business analyst. I think that we all are responsible, and this is defined in collaboration. There is no single role that will come to your project or your solution and will define this in high enough quality. Of course, I think that the role of the business analyst is really important here. So business analyst and architect are probably two most important people to address this, but the business analyst, in my opinion, should own the discussion, should drive the process. The architect may do a lot of that, but the business analyst should pay attention that someone is actually doing that. If nobody is paying attention to it, that may be focused on that specifically. I have tried to compose a list of approaches that we can use to define the non-functional requirements or quality attributes. Those that are in bold we will discuss today, but let me provide you a brief overview. So interviews, very basic approach. You all do that. If you ask the right question during the interview, or you listen to your stakeholders with enough attention, you'll find out a lot of non-functional things or quality attributes that their system must exhibit, or some constraints. The observation, probably only the passive observation, not the active one, when you try to do the job instead of your users or potential users. So you observe them and you can see some limitations of their environment. The concept for the addressing the quality attributes is not just the system that you are building, it's the environment in which the system will operate, so that you will address it. I'll try to provide an example with the I'll use the word vertushka, the thing that you use to come to the building. So if you just design how it should pass the customers or clients or visitors inside the building, you can define very nice requirements, how it should look like, how many visitors it should pass in a minute, when it should be blocked. But if you don't have the wall to the side of this thing, and you don't have the security guys sitting and watching, it will not work. People will jump underneath, people will jump over it, people will just walk besides it. And that's the analogy of how important the environment is. You need to address it, you need to define it, you need to include the environment in your definitions, and you need to observe it. The acceptance and evaluation criteria, it's a really simple concept. You have to define this on any project anyway. I think what would be the criteria on which you will measure if was the solution being built successfully or not? Will the customer accept it or not? And when you will look into those criteria, pretty often you will find a whole large list of insights on which quality attributes would be important for the client or for your team of stakeholders, or for the product if you're building it for the mass market and you can later reuse it. The interface analysis and context diagrams or data flow diagrams on a higher level, again, a very simple technique for analysis. You probably can, you're probably spending time on every project doing that. And if you look into it from the perspective of what are the quality attributes of the system that are important for us, you will compose that list. Now the quality attribute scenarios, it's a technique developed by Carnegie Mellon University, and today we'll spend some time doing that. I will explain it to you. And actually a set of scenarios with different types of quality attributes that we prioritize and use with our stakeholders as a pretty concise definition of the quality attributes. Use cases, they do not contribute to that, but you often have the alternate and exception flows in use cases, and if you spend time looking to the flows, that will be the source for non-functional requirements for you. Document analysis is pretty basic, but still useful. The questionnaire, I will show you where to look into. The root cause analysis or Ishikawa diagram, also a useful technique, or you may also do a post-mortem analysis. So imagine that your project has failed, and then try to reverse what was the reason for that and how we can prevent it. Risk analysis, again, pretty common sense, but if you look into the risk analysis with the glasses of non-functional requirements or quality attributes, you will find a lot what is important for customers. The same applies for metrics and KPIs. And there's the thing which is kind of calls for debate between agileists and non-agileists, but I like to use it. It's called the technical user stories, and we'll start from it. It's pretty simple, just 2 examples here. So you can articulate the non-functional requirements in the form of user stories. I would call this would be the next step after you have composed the list of which categories are important for you, for your project or solution. So let's read one. So as a DevOps, I want the system to use existing client's database rather than create a new one, so that we don't have to maintain additional database. It's really simple to write. You can do it straight away, tomorrow, and you can include those technical user stories, if you are using the Scrum approach, in your backlog, along with the business user stories. And again, the second one, this is how we define that the users may get frustrated with the availability of the website, and thus we may lose them as leads on our website. Now for the how to ask questions. I will not discuss this today deeply, but there's the nice expert in this field. Her name is Roxanne Miller, and she defined about 20 different quality attributes. And for those quality attributes, she has composed a book with 2,000 questions that you can look into, select which 10, 20, any amount you want questions would be important for you, and use them on interviews with your stakeholders. I'll provide a few examples. So she has 3 categories of quality attributes, and those are operation, revision, and transition. Operation is all about the system. Revision is how easy to change the system, review its parts, and transition is about the integration of the system with others. Just 6 out of those 2,000 questions here. Really simple to use. I encourage you to look for the book of Roxanne if you want the nice source of the questions you may ask to interviews, or you may ask your clients on all of the quality attributes that she has addressed, maybe 20 of this huge list that I have shown you before. Now the workshops. This is the technique that I want to discuss in details today with you. And it's about gathering the stakeholders in one room and writing a set of scenarios. BA has to facilitate that, and it's really dependent on, are you able to articulate the need for your stakeholders to be gathered in this one room and spend a day or 2 days, or this may be a set of sessions, on defining the quality attributes of the system. And the importance of the quality attributes is paramount right now. Again, you may build a very nice product, but in the end it may be all ruined with just one thing that we have forgot to do. So how it looks like? There are 8 steps. First 4 pretty simple. So we present this whole concept. It's an open concept. You can Google for it. So the Carnegie Mellon University has published it for public use. We present, I think that may be the business representative, and BA may facilitate that as well, the things that are important for the business. Then the architectural drivers. Number 3 is the technical perspective, so skip this for now, it's pretty common sense. The architectural drivers, it's not about the architecture, it's about the business needs, business goals, what is important for the business, what we are going to do, what we would like to achieve, so that we will use this information for prioritization of the scenarios. And the second part of this workshop, it's the set of brainstorming, generating scenarios. I will show those scenarios to you today. Consolidate them into a single list, prioritize, and then maybe change some of them, refine them, and in the end, as the output of this workshop, you will have you may think of it as a backlog, but it's actually a list of prioritized scenarios, sentences that describe what's important for the business, and they address the quality attributes in a systemic way that included the stakeholder collaboration, and this is the method where we have not forgot about all of the important things inside it. That's actually what I already told you. It helps to identify assumptions. So this method is very helpful when you have conflicting views of your stakeholders or people that define the quality attributes for the system, and you would like to have a structured discussion. So you can use it to actually have them walk them through those necessary steps to actually address it. So how it looks like? Again, the disadvantage is very simple. you have to convince them to gather in one room. If they are not willing to participate, probably the outcomes will not be that good. So the scenarios, they consist of 6 parts, each of them. And again, the quality attribute workshop is where we build a set of those scenarios. So number 1 is a stimulus. What affects the system. Number 2 is the source where the stimulus comes from. Number 3 is the environment. It's the condition of the environment under which it all happened. What was stimulated or who was stimulated. So remember that non-functional requirements, quality attributes may be about your team, about your development process, not just about the solution that you're building. And 5 and 6 would be the response. How we respond and how we measure specifically this response. So let's use a few examples to make it more tangible. Let's use the non-IT example. So if we have a fire in the building, this would be the scenario for that, one of the possible scenarios. So the external smoke detector sends an alarm event under peak load, and the building management system receives the event and raises the alarm within half a second. So in this example, we have all of those 6 components. I have highlighted them for you here. And it's really important to include all of them. If you miss any of them, your scenario will again make some assumptions, and assumptions is something that we want to have explicit, not implicit, something we want to avoid. Let's use some other examples. One additional scenario. It's about the modifiability, and just one aspect of modifiability, how easy it is to modify the system, the IT product, the solution that you have built. So the product manager requests that the system will accommodate some new standard, and we define that the system can accommodate this standard within 1 person-month of effort with no changes to the software architecture. Again, here we have all of those 6 necessary components. So the source would be the product manager, the stimulus would be this next version that we need to be compliant with. The environment in which it happens is that the new standard was released and we need to follow that. The system was stimulated and the response would be to accommodate these changes, and how we'll measure that the architecture had no changes. Let's use the example for security. So I'll read it through. Someone who was not authorized gains the access to the system and tries to modify the data of our consumers. System should detect this behavior, maintain the audit trail, notify the administration, and shut down the system within a specific time frame. Now the question for you is, what's missing in this scenario? Which part is not represented here? You can use your fingers to show, maybe 6 with 2 fingers, 2 arms. Try to find what's not represented here. Which part? I'll give you half a minute maximum. So any suggestions? I see that number 1, 5, 3. Anyone else? Need more time? No? So here, the environment was missing. We have not specified under which specific condition the system is operating. Maybe that's the peak load, and under the peak load, the system should not respond in this way or should respond differently. Maybe the system was starting up or shutting down. There should be different response. So we need to specifically define that we assume the normal operation, and again, all of those 6 components are important. If we will remove any of them, let's say the measurement of the response, we again will make a lot of assumptions that may increase the risk of us not being successful. One more example for availability, just one aspect of availability. So we receive some external message by process, and this process informs the operator that we have received this message and continues to operate with no downtime. Again, those 6 components on the bottom, the source would be, it's something external to the system. It's an unanticipated message, something we have not predicted. Environment is normal operation, like in the previous example. The response would be to inform the operator and continue to operate, and the measure is no downtime. But what if we think about the availability in a broader sense? What are the potential artifacts for developing these scenarios for availability? So those will be some communication channels, storage, processors. You may add more here. If you think about this, what possible sources, they may be internal to the system, external to the system. It may be something in the hardware, in the software, or something physically in the environment. The stimulus, it may be the omission of something, some error, a crash inside the system on a process, incorrect timing or incorrect response. The environment may be it's just system starting up, shutting down. It's maybe a peak load for the system or just normal operation. The response, we can prevent the failure, we can detect fault, that something bad happened, and somehow react to that. We can disable the event source, let's say that's the distributed attack. And how we will measure that? We can measure the time for response, the time for how long the system should be available, time to detect the fault, repair time. There are some additional things here, so I try to represent it in a more simpler way. And out of all of those combinations, you create many different scenarios for just one word, which is the availability. And you can build those maps for those 10, 20, it depends on your time, attributes. You remember we have shown this list in the beginning. So you select what's important for you. You may build this list, and then you can use this map as a framework or canvas for discussion with your stakeholders on which scenarios are important to be built. And in the end, you just generate a set of those sentences containing all 6 parts. And returning to the workshop, you have them prepared, you start prioritizing them. During generation of those scenarios, you will have a lot of discussions between you and your stakeholders on what's important, what to change, and how to prioritize it. And then in the end, you have this prioritized list, which you want to address then later in the development. How you would address it, it's, again, another question. You may write technical user stories, you may write those scenarios inside your backlog. You may, they actually serve, so we have use cases which serve as the input for functional requirements, and these scenarios, they replace use cases but for the quality attributes, for the non-functional part. Maybe you would like to skip that and after my presentation return to your work next week and not do any of that. And you think that your ship is large and strong and it will never be in this situation. I think that it's your risk to take what to do, but there are some things that you're risking here. Just one attribute, maybe it's not the very IT example, but the Samsung Galaxy phone that was burning inside the plane and then was banned on all flights. That was the quality attribute for that phone. So when you use it daily, don't pay attention that the battery may overheat and explode, right? But this small thing destroyed the whole concept, the whole software, and the whole system that was being built. So many efforts wasted, many money wasted inside the company, and this is something that you're risking with your products if you're not paying enough attention for quality attributes. Your reputation, NPS is the Net Promoter Score. It's how likely your customers and your stakeholders are to promote your solution to others, to their friends or colleagues. So this division that is displayed in the Babok and other sources you may face, it's kind of misleading. There are a lot of trade-offs you have to make. If you want to reach a specific quality attribute, it will affect your functionality. Let's say you want your system availability to be 5 nines. 5 nines means 99.999%, so there's only very little time when you can turn it off. But that means that maybe you have to change the way how the users log in and log out into your system. It may require the changes in the functionality that you're building, and it's always this balance. If you want to fulfill some scenario, if you want to reach some specific measurable quality attribute, it may affect the functionality, and the further you want to go with the extent of that quality attribute, the more you may have to sacrifice in the functionality. And USBs, you need to understand that those two parts, they are really tied together, and I recommend you to spend time on that during the project start during very initial stages when you're just starting on the project, so that you will not run into the situation that you have defined this later and that would be your ship lying on the back. One example about Uber that I like to pay attention to is everybody knows how it works. It's a very simple application, but do you know how it started? They have decided that the customer satisfaction will not be high enough if in the region where the Uber operates, when they started, there will not be enough amount of cars, and when I call the car, if it will not arrive within 5 minutes, I will be dissatisfied with the service. So what did they do? They decided that we will address universities and apartments for students only those two regions. And this is how Uber launched. So they have hired a set of drivers within a specific region near the university and near the apartments, and they mostly driven between those two places. But they have reached the quality attribute of availability of the service. When I called the taxi, it had arrived within 5 minutes or less. So then they expanded into some regions of the city and then to entire city. And this is still the reason why Uber launches not in all countries, in all cities at once, but they have a roadmap that we need to hire some specific amount of drivers and only then launch the service in some specific city. And it's not about the application, it's about the environment. And this single quality attribute, that was the critical thing that helped Uber to use investment. It's still, they're still not profitable. I think it's minus $700 million for this year for Uber, but everybody loves it. Again, there are lots of investments, and this was the thing that was critical for the success of the product. So the market that we are currently working in, maybe you're thinking that I'm not building the product for mass market, I have a group of stakeholders that will react, but they use smartphones, they use other products, and they have this different thinking. And now I think it's the quality market. Any of the quality attributes that you're not paying attention to may just make your product a failure, not a success. So I encourage you to use this approach, any of them, simple list, user stories, interviews, observations, maybe think about risks and acceptance. Use these scenarios. They're really simple to do. Yes, they require some collaboration between stakeholders, but they have the greater outcomes. And then you will have low risks and great success with your projects. So that's it from my side, and I'm open for any questions from you. You may ask questions in Russian if you want.
Sometimes it can be very difficult to set up clear requirements on the very first stage of the project. So do you review usually this quality requirements for your products on next stages, or do make some kind of researches for meeting up requirements at the first stages, or how do you usually work with it?
So we have defined a list of the attributes that are important for us typically on different projects, and business analysts have this list, and we have defined a set of questions, 2 questions per each attribute, that are being asked by engagement managers or BA starting on a project to the client. It's just to detect, is it important or not? Is it the pain point for the client or not? On later stages, we run discovery phases, and on those discovery phases, you can use any of those techniques. You can look what the customer has and ask more questions, but then when you started you have defined the vision and scope for your product. This is the moment when you want to run those workshops for quality attributes. They may be included in extended discovery, or, which is more typical, I don't like it, but it's more typical to finish the vision and scope part and then run in parallel the architecture definition for longer term and definition of those quality attributes in parallel to the functional part development.
Hi, Helen. So thank you for your presentation. And I must say that I completely with you on this point, because the non-functional requirements of quality attributes, this is the one that shapes architecture, so it should be addressed really early. I've got one comment, and one question. So the comment is regarding the list of responsible persons. I think one is missing, the customer. Because business vision and business drivers, this is what helps us prioritize and define the key quality.
Absolutely.
And the second question is, what's your favorite approach to prioritization on this? Because of course we need to involve customer, of course we need to involve architects, business analysts and domain experts, but how do you approach it on the workshops? So what's the most efficient?
That was not intended to be the full list, so definitely the customer is critical to be asked. I don't have like specific approaches that I would recommend to use on any project. You can use, when you have the list of technical user stories or scenarios or answers to your question, you may use the Moscow prioritization, you may use some weighted prioritization if you have, again, energy and time for it, so you can define what's important, introduce some simple weighting, let's say, well, let's not dig too deep into that, it's simple, so you can select a few of the categories and weight those things. But typically something like Moscow prioritization is really good enough, since at that stage you're already way ahead of everybody else who just ignored all of that. So I think we need to keep it simple in that way.
Thank you very much for the informative speech. My question is, you said that it's very important to set these requirements at the beginning of the project. But for example, maybe I just heard it today, and I'm in the middle of my project, and how difficult it is to implement it in the middle of the project, and if you, especially I have limited time frame, limited budget, what would you advise in this situation for those people who are in the middle but would like to?
You're definitely not alone. A lot of BAs struggle with that. I really love that most of the BAs raised the hand that we should be responsible for it. Great answer. So you just do it in the same way, but it depends on the politics inside your project. If you are to uncover that maybe the architecture is wrong, and you want to be the person who uncovers that, and it's fine, you have an open environment for doing that, which I think the most projects have, then it's fine to do in the middle of the project, identify those risks with quality attributes, and start adjusting the system before it's too late, even if we are like 50% in the middle of the way when the project is like half done. It's better to do that in that point, that close your eyes, pretend nothing happened, and then in the end see what happens. And what typically happens is it's not a success. Maybe it will work somehow, but what you want to have satisfied client. You want to have client whose actual business needs and goals were covered, and either your client or clients of your client would be satisfied with this product, right? So the earlier you do it, the better, and there's like no point when you can't do that for the project development lifecycle. Any other questions? That's my LinkedIn. If you want to contact me, thank you. That's it.